The Duke threw her out into the rain with nothing but the clothes on her back. No title, no home, no husband. The heavy iron gates of Blackthorn Estate closed behind her with a deafening clang. Inside, the servants whispered, "The noble's Larnimothy," and the man she had loved for 3 years never once looked back. To them, Evelyn Blackthorn was finished. Disgraced disquacten, we still believing. For call.
Broken, humiliated, forgotten. They are wrong.
A pendant carrying a secret she had buried for 18 years. But Evelyn had no idea that her worst nightmare was only beginning.
3 days later, Evelyn arrived at an abandoned countryside manor left to her by a distant relative. The house was old, silent, the perfect place for someone the kingdom wanted to erase. For the first time in years, there were no servants watching, no nobles judging her, no duke reminding her she wasn't good enough, just silence and memories. That night, unable to sleep, she opened the silver pendant she had hidden.
Her mother, and a man whose face had been carefully scratched away. Evelyn's hands felt exactly why, because the man in that portrait wasn't supposed to exist. The truth about him had been buried nearly 2 decades ago, buried along with innocent lives, buried by some of the most powerful people in the kingdom, including a family name that made her blood run cold. Blackthorn. At that moment, a loud knock, nobody knew she was here. Nobody. Yet someone had found her, and whoever stood outside was about to change everything.
The mansion feels strangely empty. It doesn't matter. She is gone. The problem is solved. So why couldn't he stop thinking about her final words? If there comes a day when you learn the truth, I hope you survive it. The words haunted him.
What is it? We made a mistake. The evidence against the Duchess, it was fabricated. What did you say? But the investigator wasn't finished. There is something else. A document hidden for 18 years. A document containing a name Damien never expected to see. Evelyn's. For the first time, the Duke set his eyes. The woman he had thrown away wasn't who he thought she was.
Not even close.
And somewhere far away, completely unaware of the storm gathering around her, Evelyn was about to uncover a truth Crearful had lost it might entire kingdom complete. But by the time the Duke realized what he had lost, it might already be too late.
If you enjoyed this story, don't stop here. Subscribe now and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next movie. More powerful Duke dramas, hidden heir secrets, betrayals, and emotional twists are coming soon. Stay tuned. Your next favorite story is just 1 click away. The Duke threw her out into the rain with nothing but the clothes on her back. No title, no home, no husband. Thunder roared across the night sky as the massive iron gates of Blackthorn Estate opened. A cold wind swept through the courtyard. Rain poured from the heavens in endless sheets, and standing alone in the center of it all was Evelyn Blackthorn, the woman who had once been one of the most respected duchesses in the kingdom, the woman who now possessed absolutely nothing. The servants lined the stone pathways. The guards stood silently at attention. Nobles and merchants who had traveled from neighboring provinces watched from beneath covered carriages. Nobody spoke. Nobody intervened. Nobody dared. Because at the top of the grand marble staircase stood the most powerful nobleman in the kingdom, Duke Damien Blackthorn. His expression was cold, unmoved, merciless, the same expression he had worn throughout the entire trial. The same expression he wore now as he watched his wife being cast out of his life. The rain soaked Evelyn's dark hair. Her once elegant dress clung to her skin. Mud stained the hem of her gown. Yet somehow she remained standing, straight-backed, silent, dignified, as if she refused to let anyone witness her break. The chief steward stepped forward and unrolled a scroll. His voice echoed across the courtyard. By order of His Grace, Duke Damien Blackthorn, Evelyn Blackthorn is hereby stripped of her title, status, privileges, properties, and all rights associated with House Blackthorn. Every word struck like a blade. The crowd remained silent. The steward continued. She is found guilty of deception, betrayal, and conduct unbecoming of a duchess. A murmur swept through the gathered spectators. Many nodded. Others whispered. Some looked at Evelyn with pity. Most looked at her with contempt. Rumors had spread for months. Whispers in noble circles. Stories in taverns. Accusations repeated so many times they had become accepted as truth. They said she had manipulated the Duke. They said she had lied about her background. They said she had hidden dangerous secrets from the family. Some even claimed she had plotted against House Blackthorn itself. The evidence had seemed overwhelming. The witnesses had sounded convincing. The verdict had been swift, and now everyone believed justice had been served. Everyone except Evelyn, because she knew the truth. And she knew something else. The people celebrating tonight would not be celebrating for long. The steward rolled up the scroll, his duty complete. All eyes turned toward Damien, waiting, watching, expecting him to say something, anything after all. This was his wife, the woman he had married 5 years earlier, the woman who had stood beside him through wars, political crises, and countless scandals. Surely he would show some mercy. Surely he would hesitate. But Damien's face remained unreadable. Cold blue eyes stared directly at Evelyn. For a moment, the world seemed to disappear. The rain, the crowd, the whispers, everything faded. Only the two of them remained, husband and wife, standing at the end of their story. Finally, Damien spoke. His voice was calm, dangerously calm. "You have 1 hour to leave Blackthorn lands." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Even the servants exchanged nervous glances. 1 hour, not a day, not even until morning, 1 hour. Then he added the words that shattered whatever hope remained. "If you are found here after that, you will be removed by force." The courtyard fell silent. Evelyn stared at him, not with anger, not with hatred, not even with sadness. Something far stranger filled her eyes. Disappointment, as though she had expected more from him. As though the man standing before her had failed a test he didn't even realize he was taking. Damien frowned. That look unsettled him. It shouldn't have, but it did. For the first time that night, uncertainty flickered through his chest, only for a second. Then it vanished. He reminded himself of the evidence, the witnesses, the documents, the reports. All of it pointed toward one conclusion. Evelyn was guilty, the case was closed, the matter was finished, yet somehow he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Evelyn finally lowered her gaze. A small smile appeared on her lips. A sad smile. A tired smile. The smile of someone who had carried a burden for far too long. The crowd noticed. Confusion spread. Why was she smiling? Had she lost her mind? Did she not understand what was happening? One noble woman whispered to another, "Look at her." The second woman shook her head. "She's broken." Perhaps that would have been easier. Perhaps it would have been simpler if Evelyn had collapsed, if she had begged, if she had cried, if she had pleaded for mercy. Instead, she calmly reached into her cloak. Instantly, guards tensed, hands moved toward swords. But Evelyn merely withdrew a small folded letter. Its edges were worn with age. The seal had long since faded. Most people barely noticed it. But Damien did. Something about the letter caught his attention. For the briefest moment, Evelyn looked down at it. Memories flooded her mind. A small cottage, a dying woman, trembling hands, a whispered promise. 18 years. The words echoed inside her heart. 18 years of waiting. 18 years of silence. 18 years of pretending. Everything had led to this moment. Her mother had known it would come. The old woman had prepared her for it. One day the truth would reveal itself. One day powerful people would come searching. One day the lies would begin to crumble. And when that day arrived, Evelyn would finally understand who she really was. The letter trembled slightly in her hands, not from fear, from anticipation, because earlier that morning something impossible had happened. A messenger she had never seen before had appeared. The man had traveled hundreds of miles. He had risked his life to deliver a single message. Then he had vanished without explanation. Inside the message were only 7 words. "The time has finally come. Run." That was all. No signature. No explanation, no name. Yet Evelyn immediately understood. The waiting was over. The truth was moving. And somewhere beyond the walls of Blackthorn Estate, answers were waiting for her. Answers hidden for 18 years. Answers powerful enough to change everything. Damien's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Why are you smiling?" The question slipped out before he could stop himself. The crowd looked surprised. Evelyn slowly lifted her eyes. For the first time all evening, she looked directly at him. The storm raged around them. Rain streamed down her face, yet her voice remained calm. "You believe you've won tonight." Damien's jaw tightened. "What does that mean?" She tilted her head slightly, almost as though she pitied him. Then she spoke words he would remember for the rest of his life. "If there comes a day when you learn the truth." The courtyard became perfectly silent. Even the rain seemed to fade. Evelyn's gaze never left his. "I hope you survive it." A chill ran through Damien's body. For reasons he couldn't explain, those words frightened him, not because they sounded threatening, because they sounded sincere, as though she genuinely feared what would happen when the truth emerged. Before he could respond, Evelyn turned away. The conversation was over. The marriage was over. The life she had known was over. Step by step, she walked toward the gates. Nobody stopped her. Nobody spoke. The crowd simply watched as the disgraced Duchess disappeared into the storm, watched as darkness swallowed her figure, watched as the woman they mocked vanished from their world. None of them realized they were witnessing the beginning of a disaster. None of them realized that the woman leaving tonight carried a secret capable of shaking the foundations of the kingdom itself. And none of them realized that the mighty House of Blackthorn had just made the greatest mistake in its history. Beyond the estate walls, Evelyn pulled her cloak tighter against the rain. The old letter remained hidden against her chest. For 18 years it had remained unopened, protected, guarded, waiting. Tonight, for the first time, she would finally learn what was inside. And once she did, nothing in the kingdom would ever be the same again. The rain did not stop. For 3 days and 3 nights, dark clouds covered the kingdom. Cold winds swept across valleys and forests. Rivers overflowed their banks. Roads became rivers of mud. Travelers hid inside taverns and villages, waiting for the storm to pass. But Evelyn Blackthorn kept moving, alone, hungry, exhausted. The former Duchess traveled farther from Blackthorn Estate with every passing hour. The elegant carriages she once rode in were gone. The servants who once attended her were gone. The title that had opened every door in the kingdom was gone. Yet strangely, she had never felt freer. The chains that had bound her for years had finally broken. For the first time in a very long time, she was walking toward her own destiny instead of someone else's expectation. Beneath her cloak, hidden safely against her chest, rested the old sealed letter. The letter her mother had protected until her dying breath. The letter that contained answers she had waited 18 years to uncover. Several times during her journey, Evelyn considered opening it. Several times her fingers touched the seal, but each time she stopped herself, because she remembered her mother's final words. Do not open it till you reach St. Aurelia Monastery. That had been her mother's last request, and Evelyn intended to honor it, no matter how difficult it became. By the 4th day, the storm finally began to weaken. The mountains appeared on the horizon. Towering peaks stretched into the clouds, ancient and imposing. Most people avoided this region. The roads were dangerous, the weather unpredictable, the terrain unforgiving, which was exactly why St. Aurelia Monastery had remained hidden for centuries. As the sun began to set, Evelyn finally saw it, a cluster of stone buildings nestled against the mountainside, ancient walls, weathered towers, silent courtyards. The monastery looked as though it belonged to another age entirely, a place forgotten by the world, a place where secrets could remain hidden for generations. Evelyn stared at it. Something strange stirred inside her chest, an emotion she couldn't explain. It felt familiar, as though she had been here before. But that was impossible. She had never visited the monastery. At least, not that she remembered. The thought sent a chill through her. She pushed it aside and continued forward. The massive wooden gates stood open. No guards, no servants, no signs of wealth or power, only silence. As Evelyn stepped inside the courtyard, she immediately noticed something unusual. The nuns were staring at her. Not casually, not curiously, they looked shocked. One dropped the basket she was carrying. Another covered her mouth. A third made the sign of blessing. Evelyn frowned. Something was wrong. Before she could speak, an elderly woman emerged from the monastery chapel. The old nun moved slowly, supported by a wooden cane. Her silver hair was hidden beneath a white veil. Deep wrinkles lined her face, yet her eyes remained sharp. Very sharp. The moment she saw Evelyn, the old woman froze. Her cane slipped from her fingers. It struck the stone floor with a loud crack. Tears instantly filled her eyes. For several seconds, neither woman spoke. The courtyard had become completely silent. Even the other nuns seemed afraid to move. Then the elderly nun whispered 3 words. "She's finally here," Evelyn blinked. "What?" The old woman's hands trembled. 18 years. A tear rolled down her cheek. 18 years we've waited. Confusion flooded Evelyn's mind. The woman stepped forward, slowly, carefully, as though approaching something precious. Then she looked directly into Evelyn's eyes. Not as a servant would look at a duchess, not as a nun would look at a traveler, but with something closer to respect, recognition. The old woman bowed. The entire courtyard gasped. Every other nun immediately followed, one after another, dozens of women lowering themselves before Evelyn. The former duchess stood frozen. "What are you doing?" Nobody answered. The elderly nun raised her head. Her voice shook with emotion. "Welcome home, Your Highness." The words struck Evelyn like lightning. Your Highness. Not Duchess, not Lady, not Evelyn, Your Highness. The title belonged to royalty, not to her. Certainly not to her. There must be some mistake. The old nun smiled sadly. "There is no mistake." Fear began creeping into Evelyn's chest. "What do you mean?" Instead of answering, the elderly woman extended her hand. "Come with me." The old nun led her through ancient hallways illuminated by candlelight. Stone walls surrounded them. Paintings older than the kingdom itself lined the corridors. Every step deeper into the monastery made Evelyn more uneasy. Something important was waiting. Something life-changing. She could feel it. Finally, they reached a small chamber hidden beneath the monastery. The room contained only a table, 2 chairs, and a single wooden chest. Evelyn's heart nearly stopped. She recognized it instantly. The chest was identical to the one her mother had described countless times during her childhood. Dark oak, silver corners. A royal crest carved into the lid. The crest had been deliberately scratched and damaged, as though someone had tried to erase its identity. The elderly nun approached it slowly. Then she placed both hands on the lid. "This box has been protected for 18 years. The room felt colder. 18 years ago, a woman arrived here carrying a baby." Evelyn's breath caught. "A woman fleeing for her life," the nun continued. "She begged us to hide the child." The room spun. Evelyn suddenly couldn't breathe. The old woman looked directly at her. "The child was you." Silence. Complete silence. The words echoed inside Evelyn's mind. "The child was you. Impossible." Her mother had never mentioned this. Never. The elderly nun slowly opened the chest. Inside lay several bundles wrapped in cloth. Documents, letters, official records, and something else. Royal seals, dozens of them. Evelyn immediately recognized their significance. These were not ordinary seals. They belonged to the highest-ranking families in the kingdom. Some belonged to people who had been dead for decades. Others belonged to members of the royal court. Her hands trembled. "What is all this?" The old nun's expression darkened. "The truth." Carefully, she removed the first document, a birth certificate. The paper was old, fragile, yellowed with age. Evelyn stared at the writing. Then her eyes widened. Her name appeared on the document. But the names beneath it weren't the names of her parents. They were strangers. Powerful strangers. People she had only read about in history books. "No," the paper slipped from her fingers. "No." The elderly nun nodded sadly. "Everything you believed about your birth was a lie." Evelyn felt sick. The walls seemed to close around her. Every memory from her childhood suddenly felt uncertain. Every story, every explanation, every answer, a lie. The old nun handed her another document. Then another. Then another. Each one revealed a piece of a puzzle hidden for nearly 2 decades. Each one destroyed another piece of the life Evelyn thought she understood. Then came the final document. The document that changed everything. A sealed declaration bearing the royal crest itself. The seal had never been broken. The old nun carefully opened it. Inside was a single name. Evelyn stared at it. Again and again and again, her mind refused to accept what her eyes were seeing. Because the name belonged to the royal bloodline. Not a distant cousin, not a forgotten branch, the direct royal line, the ruling family. The family that sat upon the throne. Her entire body went numb. The room became silent. The old nun allowed her time to read, to understand, to process. But Evelyn couldn't, not completely, because if these documents were genuine, then everything changed. Absolutely everything. The kingdom, the throne, the succession, the history of the royal family itself. All of it. A horrifying realization suddenly appeared. Someone had hidden this, someone powerful. Someone willing to erase a child from history. Someone willing to rewrite the truth. Someone willing to kill. The elderly nun seemed to read her thoughts. Her face became grave. "There's more." Evelyn looked up. The old woman nodded. "Much more." Then she walked toward a shelf and removed another bundle of documents. This bundle was stained with age and something darker, blood. Evelyn stared at the dark stains. The nun's voice dropped to a whisper. "People died protecting these records." A chill raced down Evelyn's spine. "How many?" The old woman hesitated, then answered, "Too many." The room fell silent again. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains, as though nature itself understood the weight of what had just been revealed. The elderly nun stepped closer. her eyes filled with fear. Not for herself, for Evelyn. There are powerful men in the capital. Evelyn listened carefully. They spent 18 years making certain these secrets remained buried. The nun's voice trembled. If they discover you've learned the truth— She stopped. Her face went pale. Evelyn already knew the answer. The old woman finally forced herself to speak. They will try to kill you. Far away, hundreds of miles from the monastery, lights burned late inside the royal capital, behind locked doors, inside secret chambers. Powerful nobles gathered around a table, their faces grim, their voices low. A messenger knelt before them, terrified. "My lords!" The room fell silent. The messenger swallowed hard, then delivered the news. "The girl has reached St. Aurelia." Every face turned pale. One noble slammed his fist against the table. Another cursed. A third looked genuinely afraid. Because they all understood what this meant. The secret they had hidden for 18 years was no longer safe. The truth was waking up, and once it emerged, an entire kingdom could fall. Back inside the monastery, Evelyn stared at the documents spread before her. The evidence, the seals, the records, the blood-stained papers. For 18 years, she had searched for answers. Now those answers sat directly in front of her, and they were more dangerous than she had ever imagined. What she didn't know was that at that very moment, powerful men across the kingdom were already preparing to hunt her down. Because if Evelyn survived long enough to reveal the truth, the throne itself might belong to her. The mansion felt wrong. Duke Damien Blackthorne noticed it the moment he returned to his study. The silence, the emptiness, the strange feeling that something important had disappeared. For 5 years, Evelyn had lived within these walls. 5 years of quiet footsteps in the corridors. 5 years of morning tea appearing on his desk before sunrise. 5 years of seeing her seated beside him during dinners, meetings, and ceremonies. And now she was gone. The estate should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt haunted. Damien stood by the massive window overlooking the gardens. Rain still fell outside. The storm had weakened, but dark clouds continued covering the sky. He stared at the gates where Evelyn had disappeared 3 days earlier. Why was he thinking about her? The problem had been solved. The traitorous Duchess was gone. The scandal was over. The estate was safe. Everything should have returned to normal. Yet nothing felt normal. Damien clenched his jaw. This was ridiculous. He had made the correct decision. The evidence had been undeniable. The witnesses had been convincing. Every report pointed toward Evelyn's guilt. He had simply done his duty. So why did her final words refuse to leave his mind? "If there comes a day when you learn the truth, I hope you survive it." The words echoed inside his head again and again and again. He hated it, because the more he thought about them, the less they sounded like a threat, and the more they sounded like a warning. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Damien turned. "Enter." The door opened. His chief butler stepped inside. The older man's expression was unusually tense. "My lord, what is it? Lord Hawthorne is here." Damien frowned. That was unexpected. Lord Hawthorne rarely visited without notice. As one of the kingdom's most influential nobles, he was not a man who wasted time. "Send him in." Moments later, the noble entered. Damien immediately noticed something unusual. The man looked nervous, very nervous. That alone was alarming. Lord Hawthorne was known for remaining calm under pressure. Yet now his face appeared pale. His movements were restless. His eyes constantly shifted, as though he feared someone might be listening. The Duke narrowed his gaze. "What happened?" The noble hesitated. Then he asked a question Damien never expected. "Have you found her?" Damien blinked. "What, Evelyn?" The noble stepped closer. "Where is she?" Damien stared at him. For several seconds he said nothing. Then he answered, "Why would that concern you?" The noble immediately regretted speaking. Damien could see it. The brief panic, the sudden caution. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Lord Hawthorne forced a smile. "No reason." The Duke's eyes hardened. "Then why ask?" The noble looked away. "A mistake. A clear mistake." And Damien noticed it immediately. The conversation ended shortly afterward. Lord Hawthorne left. But the moment he did, Damien's instincts began screaming. Something wasn't right. Why would one of the kingdom's most powerful nobles care about Evelyn? More importantly, why had he looked afraid? Damien spent the rest of the day trying to ignore the question. By evening, he failed. He summoned his intelligence network. Within hours, reports began arriving. The first report confused him. The second disturbed him. The third made his blood run cold. Several influential nobles had suddenly begun searching for Evelyn. Not casually, desperately, secretly, urgently. The list included names that shocked him. Men with enormous wealth, political leaders, military commanders, individuals who should have had absolutely no connection to his former wife, yet all of them were searching for her at the same time, and none of them would explain why. Damien stared at the reports spread across his desk, his expression darkened. "What are you hiding?" The question lingered unanswered. Then came the knock. 3 sharp knocks, the signal used by only one man. Damien looked up immediately. His most trusted investigator had returned. The Duke felt relief, finally, someone capable of providing answers. "Enter." The door opened. The investigator stepped inside, and Damien instantly knew something was wrong. The man looked exhausted. His face was pale. His hands trembled slightly. His eyes carried the look of someone who had uncovered something terrible. A horrible realization formed inside Damien's chest. The investigator swallowed hard. "My lord," silence. The room suddenly felt colder. "We made a mistake." The Duke froze. For several seconds he said absolutely nothing. The words seemed impossible. "A mistake? No." The investigator lowered his head. "My lord!" Damien's voice hardened. "What mistake?" The man placed several documents on the desk. New documents, fresh reports, evidence. The investigator's voice shook. "The witnesses who testified against the Duchess?" He paused. "They were paid." The room became silent. Damien stared, unable to process what he had heard. The investigator continued. "We tracked several financial transactions." His hands tightened. "The money came through multiple intermediaries." Damien's jaw clenched. "Who paid them?" "We don't know yet." The answer only made things worse. The Duke slowly rose from his chair. His heart pounded. The investigator wasn't finished. "There is more." Damien's stomach tightened. The man unfolded another document. The letters used as evidence against Lady Evelyn. His voice faltered. "They were forged." The Duke's face drained of color. For the first time in years, genuine shock appeared on his features. "What?" The investigator nodded. "The handwritings expert lied." "No, we confirmed it." The room seemed to spin. Damien grabbed the edge of the desk. Every piece of evidence. Every witness. Every accusation. One by one, they began collapsing. The investigator spoke again. "The Duchess never committed the crimes she was accused of." The words struck like a hammer. Silence. Complete silence. Damien's breathing became uneven. His mind raced. Memories flooded back. The trial, the accusations, Evelyn standing alone before the court. Her calm expression, her refusal to defend herself, her refusal to beg. At the time he had viewed it as guilt. Now, he wasn't so sure. For the first time, doubt entered his heart. Real doubt. Dangerous doubt. The investigator lowered his voice. "My lord." Damien looked up. The man's expression had become even darker. "There is something else." A chill ran down the Duke's spine. "What?" The investigator hesitated, then placed a final document on the desk. Damien examined it. His eyes narrowed. It wasn't evidence. It was a surveillance report. A list of movements, names, meetings, search operations. The Duke read the first line, then the second, then the third. His expression changed. The report detailed every noble currently searching for Evelyn. The list was enormous, far larger than he expected, and the names became more alarming the further he read. Powerful people, dangerous people, influential people, people who rarely cared about anyone except themselves, yet all of them were hunting for the same woman, Evelyn. Why? The investigator answered before Damien could ask. "We've been monitoring their activities." The Duke listened carefully. The investigator's voice dropped to a whisper. "They aren't searching because they want her." Damien frowned. "Then why?" The investigator looked terrified. "They're searching because they're afraid of her." The room fell silent. Damien felt ice run through his veins. Afraid? Of Evelyn? Impossible. The woman he married wasn't dangerous. She wasn't powerful. She wasn't influential, or so he thought. The investigator continued. The moment news spread that she had been exiled, he swallowed. Several noble houses immediately activated emergency operations. Damien stared. "Emergency operations?" The investigator nodded. They behaved as though a disaster had occurred. The Duke's pulse quickened. A disaster. The word echoed inside his head, as though losing Evelyn had triggered something catastrophic, as though her disappearance threatened people far more powerful than herself. The implications were terrifying, because there was only one explanation. Evelyn possessed something, knowledge, information, a secret, something valuable enough to frighten the kingdom's elite, something dangerous enough to make them panic. The Duke slowly sat down. For the first time since becoming head of House Blackthorn, he felt uncertainty, real uncertainty, Not about politics, not about war, about his own wife, the woman he thought he knew. Who exactly had Evelyn Blackthorne been? The investigator finally spoke the question Damien couldn't. "My lord." The Duke looked up. "What?" The man hesitated, then said the words that changed everything. "What if the Duchess was never their target?" Damien frowned. The investigator swallowed. What if she was the reason they were afraid? The room became completely silent. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Damien stared at the documents, the forged evidence, the bribed witnesses, the secret searches, the frightened nobles, the growing panic. Piece by piece, the truth began forming. Someone had framed Evelyn, someone powerful, some desperate, and that person hadn't wanted her punished. They had wanted her removed, far away, out of sight, out of reach. The realization hit him like lightning. The trial had never been about justice. It had been about getting rid of Evelyn, and he, Duke Damien Blackthorne, had helped them do it. For the first time since her departure, genuine regret entered his heart. Not guilt, not yet. Something deeper, something far more dangerous, the realization that he had made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But even now, even with all the evidence before him, Damien still didn't understand the full truth. He still didn't know about the monastery. He still didn't know about the hidden documents. He still didn't know about the royal bloodline. He still didn't know that the woman he had thrown away was connected to a secret powerful enough to shake the entire kingdom. And somewhere far away, hidden deep within the mountains, Evelyn was learning the truth about who she really was. While back at Blackthorne Estate, the countdown to the Duke's downfall had officially begun. The royal capital never slept. Even in the deepest hours of the night, lanterns burned behind mansion windows. Carriages rolled across cobblestone streets. Messengers carried sealed orders through hidden passages. Deals were made, secrets were exchanged, and powerful men plotted the future of the kingdom. But on this particular night, something was different. Fear had entered the capital. Real fear. The kind that made powerful men lock doors. The kind that made nobles whisper instead of speak. The kind that turned kings into targets and conspirators into desperate survivors. At the center of that fear stood a single woman, Evelyn Blackthorne, the woman the kingdom believed had been disgraced, the woman Duke Damien Blackthorne had thrown away, the woman who was never supposed to be free. Deep beneath the capital, hidden below an abandoned government building, a secret chamber remained illuminated by candlelight. Heavy stone walls surrounded the room, no windows, no servants, no guards, no witnesses. Only 12 men sat around a circular table, 12 of the most powerful men in the kingdom, men who controlled armies, men who controlled wealth, men who controlled laws, men whose names could shape the fate of nations. Yet tonight, none of them looked powerful. They looked terrified. A thick silence filled the room. No one wanted to be the first to speak, because all of them already knew why they were there. Finally, an older noble broke the silence. His voice trembled. "Confirm the report?" A messenger standing near the door swallowed hard. The young man looked terrified. Terrified because every man in this room possessed enough power to destroy his life with a single command. He lowered his head. "The information has been verified." The silence deepened. The messenger continued. "Lady Evelyn reached St. Aurelia Monastery 3 days ago." Several nobles closed their eyes. One cursed beneath his breath. Another gripped the edge of the table so tightly his knuckles turned white. The oldest man present slowly lowered his head, as though the report had physically wounded him. 3 days. 3 days. That meant everything had already changed. One noble slammed his fist against the table. "Damn Damien Blackthorne!" The sound echoed through the chamber. Another noble immediately agreed. "That fool ruined everything." A third leaned forward. How could he exile her now, out of all possible times, after 18 years? Their voices rose. Frustration became anger. Anger became panic. The messenger remained silent because he knew something they didn't. The worst part of the report hadn't even been delivered yet. At the head of the table sat an elderly duke, perhaps the most influential man in the room. His face appeared pale beneath the candlelight. His eyes were filled with exhaustion. He raised a hand. Instantly, the room became silent. What exactly does she know? The question hung heavily in the air. Nobody answered because nobody knew. That uncertainty terrified them more than anything else. For 18 years, they had controlled every piece of information surrounding Evelyn's existence, every record, every witness, every rumor, every document. The truth had been buried so deeply that most people believed it no longer existed. But now, the truth was no longer under their control. The elderly duke looked toward another council member. How many records remained at the monastery? The man hesitated, then answered quietly. We never confirmed the exact number. The room exploded. You never confirmed? You had 18 years. How could you not know? The accused noble wiped sweat from his forehead. Because we could never enter the monastery. The room fell silent again. Everyone understood. St. Aurelia Monastery had always been a problem. The sacred institution operated independently from the royal court. Kings respected its neutrality. Armies avoided its territory. Even powerful nobles hesitated to interfere with its affairs. Attempting to seize documents from the monastery would have attracted attention. Dangerous attention. So they had waited and waited and waited. Believing time would solve the problem. Believing Evelyn would remain hidden forever. Believing the secret would eventually die. Instead, the exact opposite had happened. The secret had survived, and now it was waking up. The elderly duke closed his eyes. Memories flooded back. 18 years earlier, a stormy night, a royal carriage, blood on the floor, a crying infant, panic, chaos, death. The beginning of a conspiracy so enormous that half the kingdom's elite had participated in it. The memory made him sick, because even now he remembered the decision they had made. The decision that changed everything. The child must disappear. Not die, disappear. There was an important difference. Murdering a royal child would have been too dangerous, too risky, too obvious. Instead, they chose another solution. Hide her, erase her, rewrite history, allow time to bury the truth. At the time, it seemed brilliant, the perfect solution. Now it looked like the greatest mistake of their lives. A younger noble suddenly spoke. What if she doesn't know anything? Hope briefly appeared in several faces. The man continued. What if the monastery never told her? What if she still believes she's ordinary? For several seconds, the possibility lingered. Then it died. The messenger cleared his throat. Every head turned toward him. His expression had become grim. My lords, the room immediately grew tense. What? The messenger hesitated, then delivered the final blow. According to our sources, his voice shook. The monastery opened the inheritance chamber. The room froze. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The inheritance chamber, the very words sent terror through the council, because everyone knew what was stored there. The documents, the evidence, the royal records, the proof, the undeniable proof. One noble nearly fell from his chair. Another looked physically ill. A third began muttering prayers. The elderly duke stared into the darkness. His face had gone completely white because he finally understood. They were too late, much too late. The truth had already reached Evelyn. Nothing could stop that now. The only question remaining was what she would do next. Across the room, a count with sharp features leaned forward. We still have options. The others looked at him. His eyes were cold, dangerously cold. We find her. The room listened. We recover the documents. He paused. And we eliminate the problem. Nobody needed clarification. Everyone understood what he meant. The suggestion lingered in the air. Dark, terrible, final. Several nobles looked uncomfortable. Others looked relieved. One man immediately shook his head. No. The count frowned. No? The noble's expression hardened. She's not some random witness. The room grew silent. He continued. If we make a move now, we risk exposing everything. Another noble nodded. He is correct. The debate began immediately. Some demanded action. Others urged caution. Voices rose. Arguments erupted. Accusations followed. For the first time in years, the alliance that had hidden the truth began cracking. Fear was tearing them apart, because fear always does. The elderly duke finally slammed his cane against the floor. The chamber instantly fell silent. His eyes swept across the room. Nobody spoke. The old man leaned forward. His voice became little more than a whisper. If Evelyn reveals the truth... He paused. The silence became suffocating. Every one of us falls. No one argued, because it was true. Every one of them. Not some, not most, all. The conspiracy connected too many people, too many families, too many crimes. If one thread unraveled, the entire structure would collapse. Careers, titles, fortunes, legacies, everything would disappear. The old man continued. The people will demand answers. His voice shook. The king will demand answers. The room remained silent, and when the investigations begin, nobody needed to hear the rest. They already knew. Prisons, executions, ruin, the nightmare they had avoided for 18 years. At that moment, another messenger burst into the chamber. The guards tried to stop him. The young man ignored them. My lords! Every head turned. The messenger dropped to one knee, breathing heavily. Pale with fear, the elderly duke frowned. What now? The messenger swallowed. Then spoke the words nobody wanted to hear. Blackthorn Estate has begun its own investigation. The room froze. Several nobles cursed immediately. One smashed a wine glass against the wall, another buried his face in hands. The elderly duke slowly closed his eyes. Damien, of course. Eventually, the duke would discover the forged evidence. Eventually, he would realize he had been manipulated. Eventually, he would start asking questions. And Damien Blackthorn was not a man who stopped once he began hunting for answers. The situation had just become infinitely worse. Now there were two threats, Evelyn and Damien. One possessed the truth. The other possessed the power to uncover it. A disastrous combination. The council's control was slipping away, fast. The old duke looked around the table, at the frightened faces, at the sweating brows, at the men who once believed themselves untouchable. And for the first time in 18 years, he saw the truth. They were losing. Not tomorrow. Not next month, now. The conspiracy was already collapsing. They simply hadn't accepted it yet. Far away, hidden among the mountains, Evelyn sat alone inside her chamber at St. Aurelia Monastery. The documents remained spread across the table. The royal seals, the birth records, the letters, the evidence. Hours had passed since the revelation, yet she still couldn't fully process what she had learned. Every answer created 10 new questions. Every truth exposed another lie. She stared at the royal crest embossed upon one of the documents. A crest connected directly to the throne itself. Her fingers traced the symbol. A strange feeling settled inside her heart. Not excitement, not pride. Determination. Because for the first time in her life, she finally understood something. Her mother hadn't hidden the truth to protect herself. She had hidden it to protect Evelyn, which meant someone powerful had been hunting that truth for 18 years. Someone dangerous. Someone willing to do anything to keep it buried. And if that person still existed, they would come for her. The realization should have frightened her. Instead, it strengthened her resolve, because after 18 years of lies, she wanted answers. No matter the cost, no matter the danger, no matter who stood in her way. Outside her window, the mountain winds howled through the darkness. And hundreds of miles away in the royal capital, 12 powerful men sat trapped inside a chamber filled with fear. For 18 years, they had controlled the game. For 18 years, they had written the rules. For 18 years, they believed victory was guaranteed. But they had overlooked one thing, the truth. And now the truth belonged to Evelyn, the woman they had spent 18 years trying to erase, the woman they feared more than armies, the woman who was about to bring an entire kingdom to its knees. The journey to the royal capital took 6 days, 6 days of dangerous roads, 6 days of avoiding spies, 6 days of carrying a truth powerful enough to destroy kingdoms. Evelyn traveled under a false name. The elderly nuns of St. Aurelia Monastery had insisted. The moment she left the mountains, she would become a target, not because of who she had been, but because of who she truly was. The realization still felt unreal, even now, even after reading the documents, even after seeing the royal seals, even after learning about the conspiracy. Part of her still expected someone to tell her it was all a mistake, that she was simply Evelyn Blackthorn, the disgraced duchess, the woman abandoned by her husband, nothing more, nothing less. But deep inside, she already knew the truth. The evidence was overwhelming, and every mile toward the capital brought her closer to answers, closer to the people who had stolen her life, closer to the truth her mother had died protecting, and closer to the throne that might rightfully belong to her. The royal capital appeared on the horizon shortly after sunrise. Massive stone walls surrounded the city. Golden banners fluttered above towers. The royal palace dominated the skyline, magnificent, powerful, ancient. For most people, it was a symbol of stability, a symbol of order, a symbol of the kingdom itself. For Evelyn, it represented something else. A lifetime of stolen answers. As she stared at the city, a strange feeling settled over her. She had never been here before, at least, not that she remembered. Yet something felt familiar, as though a forgotten part of her recognized the place. As though the city itself remembered her. The thought sent a chill through her. Beside her rode Sister Agnes, the elderly nun who had accompanied her from St. Aurelia. The old woman followed her gaze. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Evelyn nodded. "Yes." Then she asked the question that had haunted her for days. "Are you certain?" Sister Agnes looked at her. "Certain about what?" "About me." The nun's expression softened. "My child." She reached into her cloak and touched the sealed documents. "The evidence doesn't lie." Evelyn lowered her eyes. That was precisely what frightened her, because if the evidence was real, everything was about to change. The pair entered the city shortly before noon. The streets bustled with merchants, nobles, soldiers, and travelers. Nobody paid attention to them, which was exactly how they wanted it. Their destination lay beneath the oldest structure in the capital, the Royal Cathedral, a magnificent building that had stood for centuries. Most people believed it was simply a place of worship. Few knew what existed beneath it. Ancient archives, hidden records, secrets older than the kingdom itself, and according to Sister Agnes, one final witness, the last living person who knew exactly what had happened 18 years ago. By evening, they reached the cathedral. The massive structure towered above them. Its stained glass windows reflected the setting sun. Its bells echoed across the city. Evelyn stared at it. Her heart pounded. Somewhere inside, answers waited, real answers, not documents, not rumors, not theories, a witness, someone who had been there, someone who knew the truth, someone who remembered. Sister Agnes led her through a side entrance. They moved through silent corridors illuminated by candlelight, past ancient statues, past forgotten chambers, past doors untouched for generations. Finally, they reached a narrow staircase descending into darkness. The air grew colder the deeper they traveled. The staircase seemed endless. Stone steps worn smooth by time, ancient walls covered in dust, silence surrounded them. At the bottom stood a heavy iron door. Sister Agnes knocked 3 times. A pause followed. Then the door slowly opened. An elderly priest stood waiting. His white hair reached his shoulders, his face was lined with age. His body appeared frail, yet his eyes remained sharp, very sharp. The moment he saw Evelyn, he froze. The lantern slipped slightly in his hand. His lips parted. For several seconds, he simply stared. Then tears appeared in his eyes. The old priest dropped to one knee. Evelyn stepped back in shock. "What are you doing?" The priest's voice trembled. "Forgive me." His eyes remained fixed on her face. "I never thought I would live long enough to see this day." A knot formed in Evelyn's stomach. The old man slowly stood. His hands shook. 18 years! His voice cracked. 18 years! The words echoed through the chamber. Then he looked directly at her, not as one looks at a stranger, not as one looks at a noblewoman, but as one looks at someone long lost, someone important, someone precious, someone who should never have disappeared. The priest gestured toward the archive chamber. "Please." Evelyn followed. The room beyond was enormous. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling. Thousands of records filled the space. Centuries of history preserved beneath the cathedral. At the center stood a single table, and upon that table rested an old leather-bound journal. The priest approached it carefully. His expression darkened. This is where it began. Evelyn sat down. Her heart raced. The priest opened the journal. Inside were entries written 18 years earlier. Names, dates, events, records. The story unfolded page by page. And with every page, Evelyn's world changed. 18 years ago, the kingdom had celebrated the birth of a royal child, the future heir. The next ruler. The entire kingdom rejoiced. Festivals filled the streets. Church bells rang. Nobles traveled from every province to offer congratulations. The future seemed secure. Then everything changed. Within weeks, powerful figures inside the royal court began plotting. Ambition poisoned loyalty. Greed corrupted honor. And fear transformed allies into traitors. A conspiracy formed. A dangerous conspiracy. One that threatened the very future of the kingdom. The priest's voice grew heavy. "They feared what your existence represented," Evelyn frowned. "What did I represent?" The old man hesitated, then answered, "Legitimacy." The word hung in the air. The priest continued. "As long as you lived," his expression darkened, "certain people could never obtain the power they desired." Evelyn felt cold, very cold. The priest turned another page, then another, then another. The journal detailed everything. The secret meetings, the bribes, the betrayals, the murders. People had died protecting the royal child. Loyal guards, faithful servants, innocent witnesses, all silenced, all sacrificed, all because a group of powerful men wanted control. Evelyn stared at the pages. Her hands trembled. The priest finally closed the journal. The sound echoed through the archive. Then came the moment she had been dreading. The final truth. The old man reached beneath the table. He withdrew a small wooden box. Inside rested a royal medallion, gold, ancient, magnificent. Evelyn immediately recognized the royal crest engraved upon its surface. The priest carefully lifted it. then placed it before her. His eyes filled with emotion. "This belonged to your mother." Evelyn stared. The world seemed to stop. "My mother?" the priest nodded. "The queen." Silence. Complete silence. The words struck harder than anything she had heard before. The queen, not a noblewoman, not an orphan, not a commoner. The queen. Her knees nearly gave way. "No!" The priest's expression remained solemn. "It's true." Tears filled Evelyn's eyes. "No!" She shook her head. "This isn't possible." The priest stepped forward. "It is." The room blurred. Every memory from her childhood crashed together. The poverty, the hiding, the fear, the lies, everything. The priest gently placed another document before her, the final document. The one piece of evidence that removed all doubt. A royal birth declaration, protected by multiple seals, verified by multiple witnesses, recorded by the church itself. The name written on the document belonged to her, not Evelyn Blackthorne, not Evelyn Hart, not any of the identities she had lived under. Her true name, the name given to her at birth, the name of the kingdom's lost heir, the rightful successor, the rightful ruler, the rightful queen. Evelyn stared at it again and again and again. The truth could no longer be denied. She wasn't the daughter of a minor noble family. She wasn't an orphan, and she certainly wasn't the insignificant woman everyone believed her to be. She was the lost heir to the kingdom. The child stolen 18 years ago during a bloody conspiracy. The rightful successor to a throne built upon betrayal. Everything changed in that moment. Everything. The priest watched silently, allowing her time, allowing her space, allowing her to grieve the life she never had. Eventually, Evelyn looked up. One question remained, the most important question. Who did this? The priest closed his eyes, his expression became grim. Powerful men. Names. The priest hesitated, then slowly nodded. I can give you names. A chill filled the room. Because names changed everything. Names transformed stories into evidence. Names transformed rumors into accusations. Names destroyed empires. The old priest reached into a hidden compartment beneath the table. He withdrew a sealed ledger. The cover was stained with age. The seal remained intact, untouched for 18 years. The priest placed it before her. This contains every name. Evelyn stared. Every name, every conspirator, every traitor, every person responsible. The truth. Finally, the priest lowered his voice. But once you open that ledger, he paused. There is no turning back. Evelyn looked down at the book, then toward the medallion, then toward the royal birth declaration. The life she knew was gone. Forever ahead of her waited danger, war, enemies, betrayal, possibly death, but also justice, truth, and the chance to reclaim what had been stolen. Slowly, Evelyn placed her hand upon the ledger. Her eyes hardened. For the first time since arriving at the cathedral, uncertainty disappeared. Determination replaced it. Because the frightened woman abandoned by a duke no longer existed, something else had taken her place. Someone else. The rightful heir. The lost child. The woman who had finally learned the truth. Far above them, bells rang throughout the capital. Citizens continued their daily lives, unaware, completely unaware, that beneath the cathedral, a secret buried for 18 years had finally awakened. And once that secret became public, nothing in the kingdom would ever be the same again. The first rumor appeared at dawn. By noon, it had spread across the capital. By sunset, the entire kingdom was talking about it. And by the following morning, everything had changed. The lost heir had returned. The words moved through noble courts like wildfire. Merchants whispered them in crowded markets. Soldiers repeated them in military camps. Servants carried them through palace corridors. Tavern owners discussed them over mugs of ale. Travelers carried them from city to city, village to village, province to province. The lost heir had returned. At first, many dismissed the story as nonsense, a fantasy, a political rumor, another ridiculous conspiracy created by bored nobles. But then more information emerged: documents, witnesses, royal records, church archives, names, evidence, proof. And suddenly, people stopped laughing. Because the evidence was real, terrifyingly real. The kingdom's greatest secret had finally come to light. A royal child had vanished 18 years earlier. The disappearance had never been properly explained. Questions had been ignored. Investigations had quietly ended. Witnesses had disappeared. Records had vanished. History itself had been rewritten. And now the truth was emerging from the shadows. The lost child had survived. Not only survived, she had returned. Her name was Evelyn, and she possessed enough evidence to expose one of the largest conspiracies in the kingdom history. Inside the royal capital, panic spread among the noble families. Some immediately denied the accusations. Others quietly began burning documents. Several powerful houses locked their gates. Private meetings multiplied. Secret alliances formed overnight. Everyone understood the same thing. The kingdom was changing, fast, very fast, and nobody knew who would survive the storm. But nowhere was the impact greater than Blackthorn Estate. The mighty house of Blackthorn had become the center of public outrage. The once proud estate now resembled a fortress under siege. Crowds gathered outside the gates every day, not with weapons, with questions. Thousands of questions. Questions nobody wanted to answer. Why had Duke Damien Blackthorn exiled the rightful heir? Why had he publicly humiliated her? Why had he ignored the warnings? Why had he trusted obviously suspicious evidence? Why had he thrown away the woman who should have been protected? Why? Why? The questions never stopped, and neither did the accusations. Inside the mansion, servants whispered behind closed doors. Many had worked alongside Evelyn for years. They remembered her kindness, her patience, her generosity, the way she treated servants like people instead of property. Now they looked back on her treatment with growing horror. How could this have happened? How could nobody see the truth? How could the Duke have been so blind? The questions spread through every hallway, every room, every corner of the estate, and for the first time in his life, Damien Blackthorn found himself completely alone. The Duke sat in his study, the same study where he had signed the order exiling Evelyn, the same study where he had convinced himself he was doing the right thing. Now the room felt like a prison. Stacks of reports covered his desk. Newspapers, witness statements, investigation records, public petitions. Every document told the same story. His reputation was collapsing, piece by piece, day by day. The Blackthorn name, once respected throughout the kingdom, had become synonymous with failure. Damien stared at a newspaper headline. The words seemed to mock him. Duke exiles rightful heir. Another, Blackthorn humiliates future queen. Another, how did the Duke fail to see the truth? He crumpled the paper. But destroying the headline didn't destroy the reality. The damage was already done. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Enter. His chief steward stepped inside. The older man looked nervous, very nervous. My lord, Damien didn't look up. What now? The steward hesitated, then spoke quietly. 3 more families have withdrawn their support. The Duke closed his eyes. 3 more. That made 11 this week. 11 powerful families abandoning House Blackthorn. 11 allies disappearing. 11 relationships destroyed. Not because they hated him, because they feared what was coming. The steward continued. Several merchants have canceled contracts. Another blow. The military council has postponed negotiations. Another. And the man hesitated. Damien finally looked up, and what? The steward swallowed hard. The king has requested your presence. Silence. The room became very still. The king. Not a suggestion, not an invitation. A request which meant an order. Damien understood immediately. The royal family wanted answers. And soon the steward quietly left. The Duke remained seated, motionless for several minutes. Then he looked toward the window. Rain tapped softly against the glass, and without warning, a memory surfaced. Evelyn standing in the garden, smiling. The image hit him unexpectedly, followed by another. Evelyn sitting beside a fireplace reading, then another. Evelyn preparing tea during a long night of paperwork. Then another and another and another. 5 years of memories, thousands of moments. Moments he had never appreciated. Moments he had taken for granted. Moments he suddenly missed. The realization unsettled him. Because until now, he had focused on politics, scandal, damage control, the conspiracy, the investigation, the lost heir. But beneath all of that lurked something else. Something much more personal. Evelyn was gone, not temporarily, not for a few days, gone. And the thought hurt far more than he wanted to admit. A second knock interrupted him. His investigator entered. The same investigator who had exposed the fabricated evidence. The man looked exhausted. Weeks of investigation had taken their toll. What did you find? The investigator placed several reports on the desk. We've identified additional conspirators. Damien nodded. And the investigator hesitated. His expression changed. This wasn't about politics. The Duke immediately noticed. What is it? The investigator looked uncomfortable. My lord. He paused, then finally spoke. Lady Evelyn never tried to defend herself. Damien frowned. What? The investigator opened one of the reports. During the trial. The Duke listened carefully. The investigator continued. Multiple witnesses confirmed the same thing. His voice lowered. She knew the evidence was false. The room became silent. Damien felt a chill. Then why didn't she fight? The investigator looked down. Because she knew something bigger was happening. The answer hits harder than expected. Damien remembered the trial. Remembered Evelyn standing alone. Remembered her silence. At the time, he had interpreted it as guilt. Now it looked different, very different. She hadn't been surrendering. She had been waiting, waiting for something, waiting for the truth. The realization made him sick. For the first time, he understood how completely he had failed her. Not as a duke, as a husband. He had never trusted her. Not when it mattered. The investigator quietly continued. There is more. Damien looked up. The man hesitated, then placed a final report on the desk. The Duke read it. His blood ran cold. The report detailed Evelyn's movements during their marriage, not scandals, not crimes, acts of loyalty, acts of sacrifice. Times she had protected House Blackthorn without recognition. Times she had solved political problems behind the scenes. Times she had shielded Damien from consequences he never even knew existed. Page after page, example after example. Evidence of a woman who had spent years protecting him, loving him, supporting him, while receiving almost nothing in return. The report slipped from his fingers. For several seconds, Damien couldn't speak. The investigator quietly left, leaving the Duke alone with the truth. And the truth was devastating, because suddenly he could see everything clearly. Not the conspiracy, not the politics, not the royal succession. Evelyn, only Evelyn, the woman he had judged, the woman he had doubted, the woman he had abandoned, the woman he had never truly understood. A painful realization settled inside his chest. He had been given countless opportunities to trust her, countless opportunities to listen, countless opportunities to ask questions. Instead, he had chosen suspicion, and now he might never get another chance. Hours later, Damien stood alone inside Evelyn's former room. Nobody used it anymore. The servants had left everything untouched. Books remained on shelves. Personal belongings remained exactly where she had left them. A pressed flower sat inside a journal. A shawl hung beside a chair. A half-finished embroidery rested near the window. Small traces of a life that had vanished. The room felt painfully empty. The Duke slowly crossed the floor. His gaze settled on a framed sketch, a simple drawing Evelyn had made years earlier. The two of them standing together beneath a tree. He remembered the day. She had laughed while drawing it. He had barely paid attention. Now he wished he could relive that moment just once. A strange pressure formed in his chest. Regret, real regret, not political regret. Personal regret, the kind that keeps people awake at night, the kind that never truly disappears. Outside the estate, the kingdom continued changing. More evidence surfaced. More conspirators were exposed. More noble houses chose sides. The storm was growing, and at its center stood Evelyn. Not as the disgraced duchess, not as the abandoned wife, but as the lost heir, the rightful successor. The woman the kingdom had forgotten, and the woman Damien could no longer stop thinking about. For the first time in his life, the mighty Duke of Blackthorn no longer feared losing power. He no longer feared losing influence. He no longer feared losing his reputation, because all of those things could be rebuilt. What terrified him was something far worse. The possibility that Evelyn would never forgive him. The possibility that he would never see her smile again. The possibility that he had lost her forever. And for the first time since becoming Duke, Damien Blackthorn prayed, not for power, not for victory, not for his family name, but for one chance to find Evelyn, one chance to tell her the truth, one chance to apologize, one chance to fix the mistake that had destroyed both their lives. What he didn't know was that Evelyn was no longer the woman he remembered, and the closer he came to finding her, the more painful that realization would become. The kingdom had changed. In only a few short weeks, everything had changed. The conspiracy that had remained hidden for 18 years was collapsing. Powerful nobles were being arrested. Secret records were being exposed. Witnesses who had remained silent for decades were finally speaking. The truth was spreading faster than anyone could stop it, and at the center of it all stood Evelyn. No longer Evelyn Blackthorn. No longer the disgraced duchess. No longer the woman cast into the rain. Now she was something else entirely. The lost heir. The kingdom's true successor. The woman whose existence threatened everything the conspirators had built. Everywhere she went, people bowed. Everywhere she appeared, crowds gathered. Every word she spoke carried weight. Every decision she made shaped the future of the kingdom. And yet, None of those changes were what frightened Damien Blackthorne. What frightened him was the possibility that he had lost her forever. For weeks he searched, while investigators uncovered more evidence, while nobles turned against one another, while the capital drowned in scandal. Damien searched. Every report, every witness, every rumor, anything connected to Evelyn, he followed them all. Not because he wanted political answers, not because he wanted to protect House Blackthorne, not because he wanted to save his reputation. For the first time in his life, his reasons were personal, painfully personal, because every night he closed his eyes and saw the same image. A woman standing in the rain, a woman looking at him with disappointment instead of hatred, a woman walking away. And no matter how many times he relived the memory, the ending never changed. She always left. Eventually, information reached him. Reliable information. Evelyn would appear before the royal council, the first public gathering since her identity had been revealed. The entire kingdom was watching. Nobles, military leaders, religious officials, foreign ambassadors, everyone would be there. And for the first time since she left Blackthorne Estate, Damien would see her again. The morning arrived. The royal council chamber had never been so crowded. Thousands gathered outside. Hundreds filled the interior. The atmosphere felt electric. History was about to unfold. Damien entered quietly. For perhaps the first time in his adult life, nobody cared that he had arrived. No whispers followed him. No admiration greeted him. No one rushed to earn his favor. The mighty Duke of Blackthorne had become little more than a spectator, and somehow he deserved it. The realization hurt, but not nearly as much as what happened next. The chamber doors opened. The room immediately fell silent. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. Every eye focused on the entrance. Evelyn entered. Damien's breath caught. For several seconds, he forgot how to breathe. Because the woman walking through those doors looked nothing like the woman he remembered. Not physically. She was still Evelyn, still beautiful, still elegant, still carrying herself with quiet dignity. But something fundamental had changed. Confidence, power, purpose. The uncertainty she once carried was gone. The hesitation was gone. The sadness was gone. She walked like someone who finally understood exactly who she was. Royal guards surrounded her, the finest soldiers in the kingdom. Not protecting a noblewoman, protecting the rightful heir. As she passed, people bowed. Nobles bowed. Generals bowed. Judges bowed. People who once ignored her now lowered their heads in respect. Damien watched it happen. And for the first time, he truly understood what he had thrown away. Not a title, not a marriage, not an alliance. A person, an extraordinary person. One he had never truly seen. Evelyn took her place at the center of the chamber. The crowd remained silent, waiting, listening, respecting her in a way Damien never had. The realization twisted inside his chest. Then Evelyn began speaking. She spoke of truth, justice, accountability, not revenge, not punishment, justice. The distinction mattered. Several times the crowd applauded. Several times people openly wept. The kingdom had fallen in love with her, and Damien understood why. Because for the first time he was seeing the woman everyone else saw. The woman hidden beneath years of sacrifice and silence. The woman he had failed. Hours later, the gathering ended. One by one, nobles departed. Officials returned to work. The crowds slowly dispersed. Eventually, only a handful of guards remained. And Evelyn, standing alone on a palace balcony overlooking the capital. The city stretched endlessly before her. Golden sunlight bathed the rooftops. Church bells echoed in the distance. The kingdom looked peaceful. For the first time in years, Damien stood at the far end of the corridor, watching, hesitating. His heart pounded harder than it had during battles, harder than political negotiations, harder than any moment he could remember, because he wasn't facing an enemy. He was facing the consequences of his own choices. A guard approached him. "The lady here is willing to see you." Damien nodded, slowly, silently. Then he walked forward. Each step felt heavier than the last. Eventually, he reached the balcony. Evelyn didn't turn around. She already knew he was there. The silence stretched between them. Long, painful, familiar. Finally, Damien spoke. "Hello?" "Evelyn." His voice sounded strange, uncertain, human. Evelyn continued looking toward the city. "Hello, Damien." No anger, no bitterness, no warmth. Just calm. That calmness frightened him more than hatred ever could. Because hatred meant emotion. Hatred meant there was still something left. This felt different, dangerously different. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Damien finally said the words he had rehearsed countless times. "I'm sorry." Silence. The wind stirred Evelyn's hair. The city continued moving below them. Life continued. But the world between them seemed frozen. Damien swallowed, then continued. I was wrong. The words felt heavier than any confession he had ever made. I should have trusted you. His voice cracked slightly. I should have listened. Evelyn remained silent, so Damien kept talking. Because if he stopped now, he might never speak again. I believed lies. He lowered his head. I believed strangers. Another painful pause. When I should have believed my wife, the truth hurt. Every word hurt, because every word was true. For years, Damien had convinced himself he was a rational man, a careful man, a fair man. Now he saw reality. When it mattered most, he had failed. Not because he lacked intelligence, because he lacked trust. Evelyn finally turned. Their eyes met. The sight nearly broke him. Because there was no hatred there, only sadness. The kind of sadness reserved for things that cannot be repaired. Damien felt panic rise inside him. A strange, desperate panic. I know apologies aren't enough. His voice became rough. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. He took a step forward. But please, the word escaped before he could stop it. Please, a duke begging. Something he had never done. Not once, not ever, yet here he was. Because pride no longer mattered. Only Evelyn mattered. Then something happened that would shock the entire kingdom if anyone witnessed it. The mighty Duke of Blackthorn knelt, not partially, not symbolically, fully, one knee against the stone floor, head lowered. The position of a man seeking mercy. The position of a man admitting defeat. The position of a man with nothing left to protect. Evelyn stared. Even the guards appeared stunned. Nobody had ever seen Damien Blackthorn before anyone, yet now he did. Not before a queen, not before a king. Before her, his voice shook. I was blind, the confession echoed across the balcony. I failed you, another pause. I hurt you. His shoulders lowered, and I will regret it for the rest of my life. For the first time, genuine emotion appeared in his eyes. Not political calculation, not strategy, pain, real pain, the pain of understanding exactly what he had lost. I thought I was protecting my family. His voice broke, but I destroyed it. The silence returned, long, heavy. Damien waited, prayed, hoped for anything, a response, a reaction, a chance. Finally, Evelyn stepped forward, slowly, calmly. She looked down at the man kneeling before her. The man who had once held complete power over her life. The man who had cast her into the storm. The man who now looked completely broken. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Evelyn asked a single question, one simple question. A question that would determine everything. Would you have believed me if I had told you the truth back then? The words struck harder than any sword. Damien froze. His mind immediately returned to that night. The accusations, the trial, the forged evidence, the witnesses, the lies. What would have happened if Evelyn had stood before him and said, I am the lost heir. I am the rightful successor. I am innocent. Would he have believed her? The answer appeared instantly, brutally, painfully. No, he wouldn't have. Not then. Not with the evidence before him. Not with the doubts he carried. Not with the trust he lacked. No, he wouldn't have believed her. The realization shattered him, because for the first time he fully understood the depth of his failure. Not only had he abandoned her, he had created a world where she couldn't trust him with the truth. Damien opened his mouth, then closed it. No words came, no excuses, no explanations, nothing, because there was nothing to say. They both already knew the answer. The silence itself became his confession. Evelyn studied him for several moments, then slowly nodded, not with satisfaction, not with victory, with understanding, because she had known the answer long before she asked the question. The question wasn't for her, it was for him, and now he finally understood. The distance between them had never been created by conspirators, or forged evidence, or political schemes. It had been created by trust. Trust he failed to give, trust she needed most. As the sun began setting over the Capitol, the balcony fell silent once more. One woman standing, one man kneeling, and between them lay 5 years of love, 5 years of mistakes, 5 years of things that could never be undone. For the first time in his life, Damien Blackthorn understood that forgiveness and reconciliation were not the same thing. And as he looked into Evelyn's calm eyes, he realized something terrifying. She might forgive him one day, but that didn't mean she would ever choose him again. Winter arrived the same week the kingdom finally learned the truth. Snow covered the Capitol. White blankets stretched across rooftops. Church bells rang through the cold morning air. And throughout the kingdom, people gathered around newspapers, tavern tables, and public squares to hear the story that would be remembered for generations. The conspirators had fallen. The traitors had been exposed. The lies that had survived for 18 years had finally collapsed. One by one, the names contained within the secret ledger became public. Powerful dukes, influential ministers, military commanders, royal advisors, men once believed untouchable, men who had ruled from the shadows, men who had stolen a child's future to satisfy their own ambitions. Now they stood in chains. The trials lasted weeks. Evidence flooded the courts. Witnesses testified, documents surfaced, the truth became impossible to deny. The kingdom watched in stunned silence as one revelation after another emerged. Every hidden crime, every forged record, every betrayal, every murder committed to protect the conspiracy. By the end, no one could pretend ignorance. No one could deny reality. The kingdom's history had been built upon a lie, and at the center of that lie stood a woman who had spent her entire life paying the price for someone else's greed. Evelyn, the lost heir, the forgotten child, the woman who should never have been forgotten. The people loved her, not because of her bloodline, not because of her claim to the throne, but because of the way she handled victory. She never demanded revenge. She never celebrated the downfall of her enemies. She never abused her newfound power. Instead, she focused on justice, fairness, truth, the very qualities the kingdom had lacked for nearly 2 decades. Every speech she gave strengthened public support. Every decision she made inspired confidence. The people didn't simply accept her as their future ruler, they embraced her. And for the first time in many years, the kingdom felt hopeful. The day of the coronation arrived beneath clear blue skies. The entire capital transformed into a celebration. Banners filled the streets. Flowers decorated every building. Crowds traveled from every province. Thousands upon thousands gathered to witness history. Children sat on their fathers' shoulders. Merchants closed their shops. Even foreign ambassadors filled the city. Everyone wanted to see the woman who had survived 18 years of deception and emerged stronger because of it. Inside the palace, preparations were underway. Servants hurried through hallways. Officials reviewed schedules. Guards secured every entrance. Excitement filled the air. Yet inside her private chamber, Evelyn sat alone. For the first time all day. For the first time in weeks. For the first time since learning the truth, she was completely alone. The room was quiet, peaceful. Sunlight streamed through the windows. The royal crown rested on a velvet cushion nearby, waiting, the symbol of everything she had lost and everything she had regained. Evelyn stared at it for a long time, then she smiled softly. Not because she desired power, not because she desired recognition, but because she finally understood something. Her journey had never truly been about the throne. The throne was only the destination. The real journey had been discovering herself. For years, she had allowed others to define her, first as an orphan, then as a noblewoman, then as a duchess, then as a disgrace. Every stage of her life had been shaped by someone else's expectations, someone else's choices, someone else's version of who she should be. Now that was over. For the first time, she belonged to herself. A gentle knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." The door opened. Sister Agnes entered. The elderly nun smiled warmly. The sight immediately softened Evelyn's expression. "You're nervous." Evelyn laughed quietly. "Is it that obvious?" The nun nodded. "A little." For a moment, they simply stood together. 2 women who had survived impossible circumstances. 2 women connected by 18 years of secrets. Finally, Sister Agnes spoke. "Your mother would be proud." The words hit harder than expected. Tears immediately filled Evelyn's eyes. Because despite everything she had gained, there was still one person missing. The woman who had sacrificed everything. The woman who had protected her. The woman who never lived long enough to see the truth revealed. Her mother. Evelyn looked toward the window. "I wish she were here. So do I." Silence settled between them. Comfortable silence. Then Sister Agnes smiled. "But I think she already knows." A tear slipped down Evelyn's cheek. She smiled through it. Perhaps the nun was right. Perhaps somewhere beyond this world her mother was finally at peace. The cathedral bells suddenly began ringing. The coronation was about to begin. The moment had arrived. The kingdom was waiting. Hours later, the grand cathedral stood filled beyond capacity. Nobles occupied every seat. Foreign dignitaries lined the walls. Citizens crowded outside. History was unfolding. At the center of it all stood Evelyn, dressed in royal white, elegant, confident, radiant. The years of pain had not broken her. They had refined her, strengthened her, transformed her. The ceremony proceeded with ancient traditions. Sacred vows, royal declarations, historic rituals. Then came the final moment, the crown. The archbishop lifted it carefully. The entire cathedral held its breath, and as the crown settled upon Evelyn's head, the bells rang, the crowd erupted. Cheers echoed through the city. The kingdom had its queen. At last outside, celebrations exploded across the capital. Music filled the streets. Fireworks illuminated the evening sky. People danced, laughed, celebrated. The future felt bright again. Yet among the countless faces in the crowd stood one man who wasn't celebrating, Damien Blackthorne. The former duke watched from a distance, alone. Quiet, unnoticed. Weeks earlier, he would have stood near the throne, at the center of power. Today he stood among ordinary spectators, and strangely, he accepted it because he understood why. Actions have consequences, choices have costs, and some mistakes change lives forever. As the crowd cheered for Evelyn, Damien felt both pride and sorrow. Pride because she had become everything the kingdom needed. Sorrow because he was no longer part of her life. He remembered the first time they met. The first time she smiled at him. The first time she trusted him. The countless moments he had overlooked. The countless opportunities he had wasted. Only after losing her had he truly understood her value. The realization would haunt him forever. Not because he lost a queen, because he lost Evelyn. The woman, the person, the wife he never truly appreciated until it was too late. As night fell, the celebrations continued. Eventually, Evelyn slipped away from the festivities, only for a short while, only long enough to find a moment of peace. She walked through the palace gardens. Snow glittered beneath moonlight. The world felt quiet again, for the first time all day. Then she noticed someone standing near the old fountain. Damien. He immediately stepped back, as though afraid his presence might disturb her. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Damien offered a respectful bow, not as a husband, not as a duke, simply as a man. "Your Majesty." The title sounded strange coming from him. Evelyn smiled gently. "Damien." Silence followed. Not uncomfortable, not painful, just honest. Finally, Damien spoke. "I wanted to congratulate you." His voice remained calm. "You deserve this." Evelyn studied him carefully. He looked different, older, sadder, wiser. The arrogance that once defined him had disappeared. In its place stood humility. Earned through loss, they talked for several minutes. Not about politics, not about conspiracies, not about the past. Just two people sharing a final conversation. Eventually, Damien smiled. A genuine smile. Perhaps the first genuine smile she'd seen from him in years. "I'm glad you're happy." The words were simple, but sincere. Evelyn believed him, and because she believed him, she smiled. "Thank you." Another pause. Then Damien looked toward the stars. "I spent a long time asking myself how to earn forgiveness." His voice softened, and eventually I realized something. Evelyn listened. "You don't earn forgiveness," he smiled sadly. "You simply become someone worthy of it." The statement lingered between them. Then he bowed once more. Not dramatically, not desperately, just respectfully. And when he straightened, there were tears in his eyes. Not tears of regret, acceptance. The most difficult kind. "I hope your future is everything you deserve." For a brief moment, Evelyn felt something shift inside her. Not romance. Not longing, peace. The pain that once connected them had finally loosened its grip. The wound had healed, the scar remained, but the pain was gone. "And sometimes, that is enough," Damien turned. Then slowly walked away. No dramatic farewell, no final plea, no desperate attempt to change her mind. Just a man accepting the consequences of his choices. Evelyn watched until he disappeared into the darkness. Then she looked toward the stars. A cold breeze stirred the trees. The kingdom slept peacefully around her. For the first time in her life, she felt completely free. Not because she had become queen. Not because she had reclaimed her birthright. Not because her enemies had fallen. Because she had finally chosen herself. She had stopped living for expectations, stopped living for approval, stopped living for fear. The girl hidden for 18 years was gone. The woman abandoned in the rain was gone. Even the broken duchess was gone. In their place stood someone stronger, someone wiser, someone whole, a queen, a survivor, a woman who had endured betrayal and emerged victorious. As dawn approached, the first rays of sunlight touched the palace towers. A new day, a new era, a new beginning, and somewhere beyond the horizon, her mother's memory lived on. The kingdom had gained a ruler, the people had gained hope, justice had finally prevailed, and Evelyn had gained something far more valuable than a throne. She had found herself.